This is episode 702 of the Rio Grande Foundation's Tipping Point, New Mexico. I'm Paul Gessing, president of the Rio Grande Foundation, New Mexico's free market think tank. You can find out more about the foundation at riograndefoundation.org. I am very pleased to be joined for this week's show by Representative Elaine Sena Cortez. She is a freshman representative from Hobbs, New Mexico. Welcome to Tipping Point, New Mexico, Representative Sena Cortez.
Thank you so much, Paul. It is an honor to be asked to be on this podcast today.
Oh, well, thank you very much. It was an honor to work with you during this legislative session, in part to serve as your expert witness on legislation that would have eliminated New Mexico's personal income tax. And I think I spent a lot of time in committees in which you sat. But before we get into the legislative session and kind of as a freshman, how you found that entire process, especially a freshman Republican. So being in the minority party, let's talk a little bit about who you are and why you decided to undergo the torture. I mean, the serve your constituents in Santa Fe as a representative from Hobbs. So, uh, yeah, just tell us about yourself.
Well, for those of you that don't know, currently I run my own business, Sena Cortez Consulting, and I'm also a professor at University of the Southwest and Eastern New Mexico University, and I teach undergrad and business courses at both universities. I am currently trying to break into the doctoral classes at the University of the Southwest, so that's my goal there. And at Eastern New Mexico University, I teach their capstone business courses in their undergrad and master's program. So I'm the last stop before they graduate.
And you also have a young child. Is it a daughter or son?
It's a girl. And so I'm 42 years old. I had her when I turned 40. And it's funny because at the legislature, everyone refers to me, oh, you're so young, you're a baby. But according to my daughter's doctor, I'm a geriatric mother. And so I hear that term all the time when I go to those pediatric appointments. So I had her when I turned 40, and her name is Layla. And I'm also married to Ephraim Cortez, who is the love of my life, and he is a fifth judicial district judge.
Oh wow. Okay. So that's a lot of things going on in order to be a legislator. So uh, just talk about, the difficulty and the challenge. And, legislators know what they're getting into, but it's also something that's very challenging for people like yourself who are not retired, who have spouse, a child, a job. Uh, that must have been a difficult thing to do, especially for 60 days this year.
Well, I really feel like something that we say in Spanish is vale la pena, meaning that it is worth the trouble. So I grew up, as they would say, on the wrong side of the tracks. I grew up in the hood, and I attended the highest risk school here in Hobbs. And many people in my neighborhood, they got addicted to drugs, they became teen moms. And back in my day, gangs were really popular, and many were killed in drug and gang affiliated wars. And so, Paul, I should have been a statistic, and I could have been a statistic, but my life is about the power of choosing the life you want by the choices that you make. And so I knew that I would make it out of the hood one day, and I knew just because I grew up rough, I didn't have to answer rough. And that meant working 4 jobs to put myself through my undergrad, my master's, and then actually the organization I worked for at the time paid for my master's, and then my husband and I are still paying for my doctorate. um, but I knew that I got to create the life that I wanted again by the choices that I made. And so I grew up with a military dad who's also a pastor and 2 older brothers. And so it was survival of the fittest in my household. And so a lot of people say, man, you just went through a really tough debate in the legislative session. How are you holding up? And my perspective was, well, where I grew up and in my household with 2 older brothers and a military dad, that was a Tuesday. Like, if we disagree, we banter, and it is all part of it. And so being in the legislative session, vale la pena. It was worth the trouble. And I felt like my husband really made a big sacrifice because I stayed a block away from the Capitol, and I had my mother-in-law there and my baby girl. And so when I had a break or a lunch break, I would just walk across the street and go be with them. And he would take turns driving to Santa Fe to be with us. And he got to come up about 4 or 5 times. He still had a full docket, and he's had a ton of different trials and cases to hear, but he made a really big sacrifice, but he supports my journey, and I really couldn't do it without him. He's been such a rock for me and my little girl. And so a 60-day session, I know most people would be shocked to hear this, but it was exhilarating for me. I worked so hard to be in this position, Paul. My first race, I lost, and I lost against the oil and gas guy here in Lee County, who is now Senator Larry Scott, and I lost just by a little bit. But now he's my mentor in oil and gas, and he's actually a dear friend. And when I hear no, I don't really hear no. I hear not right now, try another way, use a back door. And so when I knew that God had called me to this position, no was not an option for me. So I lost my first campaign. So I tried again the moment the opportunity presented itself. And so I felt like I worked for this position for 4 years. And so to me, even if I lost in a debate or on a vote, to me, even when I lose, I'm winning because I'm there. I get to have a voice. I get to have a vote. And that is huge because I worked so hard to be in this position.
That's great. That's an amazing story. So you're obviously a Republican. You're from Hobbs. Uh,
And Paul, let me add, I'm a conservative Republican.
Fair enough. Yeah, and your vote index on the Freedom Index highlights that, as do some of the bills that you sponsored. The one that we worked together on, eliminating the personal income tax, but you also had a bill to eliminate the state Social Security tax. Uh, I guess my question here is twofold. One is, I would love to know about your philosophy of government, and also how a woman of Hispanic descent in Southeast New Mexico, did you always kind of take the conservative approach, or was there some epiphany at some point? How do you come to being this conservative, I think we'll say, rising star here in the New Mexico legislature?
Well, thank you so much for those kind words. It's ironic, right, that I'm in government and I'm always trying to push government out of the way. So I believe that we should have less government and we should be giving power back to the people because that is where it has always belonged. And so I'm always trying to find ways to have less government and let the people decide. So no, I grew up in a very conservative home. I live in oil country. And so for here, it is God, it's country, it's New Mexicans. I grew up in a very Christian conservative home. My dad was a military veteran who fought in the Vietnam War, but he was also a pastor, and he's still a pastor. My late mom passed in 2018 with a very long battle against cancer. But her and my dad were pastors together. My mother was a teacher. She was an educator. And I know it's funny, right? Like when people see me, they see that I'm Hispanic. And in New Mexico, I probably have the appearance of a Democrat. And something that I told people in my campaign, well, why don't you put someone who looks like the other side, but has your values in office? And so being the first female and Hispanic to ever be in this position to represent District 62 is it's a really huge deal. We broke glass ceilings by being able to enter into the legislature. And so it's a really big deal. And that's why I feel like I'm so positive about being in this position and even coming into the minority, because I'm the first. I'm the first female Hispanic to ever occupy the seat. And so, Paul, I want to be a good steward of it. And I know what I signed up for. It's, having two older brothers and a military dad, it was tough in my household. It wasn't like, oh, you're the only girl, you're going to be spoiled and get whatever you want. No, it was like, rub some dirt in it, pull yourself up by your bootstraps, figure it out, go work. If you want it, you're going to have to work for it. Nothing's going to be handed to you. And so that is my same approach, with this legislative session. And I heard a lot of people say, well, it's unfair and my bill didn't get heard. Well, we're in the minority. Every chair of every committee has the right to decide which bills get heard. And guess what? Mine were not being, I had very conservative approaches. My bills were not just on the top that the chairs were excited to hear. But you know what I did, Paul? I would show up at their seat on the House floor and say, hey, I was just checking in. When is my bill going to get put on the agenda? And I had one chair tell me, it will never be heard. And I was like, never? That's kind of an absolute. I was like, you're never going to hear my bill? And she's like, not unless you change it. And I was like, hey, how about I propose my bill? And then if you have a friendly amendment, I can take the bill. And she's like, we're never going to hear your bill unless you change it first. And I was like, okay, so I will check back in at your desk tomorrow at 3 o'clock. And she was like, looked at me like I was crazy. And I did it for up to a month. I would check in every single day. I would call, I would text, and I was like, hey girl, just checking in. Or, hey, Mr. Chair, just checking in. When is my bill going to get heard? And I did it. And the thing is that I don't hear no. I hear keep asking. I hear find another way. And I did it. And the majority of my bills were heard. And I had at least 2-hour debates on my bills. And so I don't feel like anything is unfair. I feel like you got to work for it. And if you want it, you also have to nurture relationships. And obviously, I am, like you said, the Freedom Index showed what a conservative I am. But I made friends with the other side and nurtured relationships. And we would go at it in committee and debate. And sometimes emotions would get high. But my perspective was, we have to nurture relationships with the other side because that's the only way it's going to work. It's the only way we're going to get legislation passed being in the minority. And I felt like I was able to do that with one of the bills that I carried, which was the Silver Alert. I co-sponsored it with a Democrat. And it passed and will become law on July 1st. And so the Silver Alert is a lot like the Amber Alert, except it's for people that are medically diagnosed with Alzheimer's or some sort of cognitive impairment. Well, the law that I was able to get passed, and I co-sponsored it, it is now if you just show signs, you don't need a medical diagnosis. So if you show signs of Alzheimer's or some sort of cognitive impairment and you go missing, we can issue a Silver Alert to bring you back to your family. Now, I know that bill doesn't change everything, but it does move the needle just a little bit, and it helps a really vulnerable population. So, Paul, I bet my perspective today is going to be a lot different than most Republicans, but I believe that there's hope. And while there were some bad bills passed for New Mexico, I also believe there was so much good that we did for New Mexico. One of them is that we defeated the largest proposed tax on New Mexico's history, which was the Paid Family Medical Leave Act. And that would have broken the backs of small businesses. And we were able to defeat that. We were also able to kill a punitive tax on the oil and gas industry. We also defeated a massive tax on alcohol that really would have punished the low income earners. And we were able to kill multiple housing bills that would have made it harder for individuals and families to find affordable housing. Another success what was that we were able to finally get to the CYFD reforms up to the governor. And then we were successful in killing 2 bills that would have infringed on our Second Amendment rights. And that was the Go Safe Act and the Unfair Trade Protections Act, which would have driven gun stores right out of the state. And so I want to tell people, some of the outlandish things that you hear on the media, not everything got passed. And even if it got passed in committee, the Speaker of the House held back some of these egregious bills from us even voting on them. And so don't believe everything that you hear out in the media, because there was, while bad bills did pass, we still had a lot of great Republican successes. And I'm hopeful, Paul. I always see the glass is half full. And I believe it's a start. And I believe it's a start to one day take the majority back.
Well, that's amazing and definitely an optimistic view. And I appreciate that. Because it is challenging and frustrating. And I do want to talk to you about a couple of the bills that you introduced HB 275, eliminating the personal income tax, HB 293, eliminating the Social Security tax, HJR 17, a constitutional amendment on states of emergency and public health emergencies. Those are three that are very much oriented towards the Rio Grande Foundation's view of limited government, reducing the burden of government, and in the case of HJR 17, restoring a constitutional balance of power to government in New Mexico. Any of those that you would like to expound upon a little bit and explain, how you think New Mexico would be better if we actually adopted those pieces of legislation?
Well, Paul, there is one indisputable fact in New Mexico right now and across the United States is that people are struggling financially, and the cost of all lines of insurance have increased significantly. Groceries that we could now, like that we used to be able to afford, are now like luxuries. And so, what really inspired this trip is my husband and I, and you heard this story when we worked together on the elimination of income tax when we presented it in committee, was we took a trip to the grocery store and we went to check out, and it was over $600. And I was shocked that we were having to pay that for just basic groceries. We were not buying Wagyu beef, it was not caviar, it was the basics. And so I looked at my husband after we walked out and I was like, how on earth are people making it? And the truth is, Paul, people are not making it. You have single income households, you have large families, you have retirees with fixed incomes, and they're not making it. And so a lot of New Mexicans are making everyday purchases with credit cards, and that is driving up the debt crisis. And so now is the time to throw our people a life preserver. And so my perspective in eliminating the income tax was that it would expand the purchase power of New Mexicans, which means more money is flowing in our economy, and it would be a favorable environment for other businesses. The goal is to attract businesses to our state and to diversify our economy. And there are other states that do not have a personal income tax. As a matter of fact, there are 9 other states. It's Texas, Alaska, Florida, Nevada, New Hampshire, South Dakota, Tennessee, Washington, and Wyoming. And so this was not a radical proposition. Other states are doing this, and these other states are successful economically. They're booming. And right now, New Mexico, New Mexico is competing with these states for workers. And so often when someone is looking to move to another state, they're looking at favorable tax structures. And right now, New Mexico desperately needs doctors and mental health professionals and public safety professionals and construction workers, and the list goes on. So I believe that our tax structure shouldn't be deterring people from coming to our state or cause people to leave our state. We should have a favorable tax environment to attract the doctors and the lawyers and the tradespeople. And the left, one thing that I am sick of hearing from the left is, oh, well, billionaires don't need tax breaks. And you hear it. You hear it in the federal government from the left, and then you hear it in New Mexico. And to me, that is recycled rhetoric. And I'm like, what billionaires are you talking about in New Mexico? Because I don't know any billionaires. What billionaires are you referring to?
Yeah, no, that's
So,
absolutely true.
so I believe that, the bill that I proposed would have helped New Mexicans because they would still be able to, qualify for tax credits and tax rebates. And in most cases, Paul, the money saved on the personal income tax, they would have been able to pump back into our economy, and we would have gotten it through the gross receipt taxes because they would have been buying things that they need: groceries, gas, rent, all of the things that they need instead of using the credit card. So I know that you really had some great comparisons and correlations whenever you presented it with me regarding these other states that are booming economically, because I know that one of the questions was how can you make this correlation that it's going to make our economy boom? And I know that during that committee that we presented together, you were able to really draw some great comparisons and correlations.
Yeah, well, uh, a lot of those states that are growing fast, you're right there. You're in Hobbs, which is right next to Texas, and Texas is obviously a state that's booming and lacks a personal income tax. It's by no means the only one, but with New Mexico having such amazing oil and gas revenues coming out of your region of the state, it's something that we can do better, broadly speaking, in New Mexico. Our economy needs a boost. And whether we have the oil and gas or not, as it's grown in recent years, uh, it's never a bad time to reduce the tax burden on productive activity in the state of New Mexico. So,
I
uh, it,
and Paul, the other side, they keep proposing we're making life more affordable for New Mexicans. No, you're not. If you drive up energy costs in any way, you're not making life more affordable for New Mexicans. Actually, those are unaffordable acts, is what we're going to call them. And so, the goal is to make it life better for our people, to make it more affordable, because at the end of the day, people care about having a quality life that they can afford. They care about their kids having a solid education. They care about their kids' future. They want to have good lives. And part of having a good life is being able to afford it. And that goes into my next bill on eliminating Social Security tax. And I shared just a little bit with you earlier, Paul, is, I grew up in very humble beginnings. I was the kid whose dreams were so much bigger than my family's income. And to paint the picture of how rough I grew up, Paul, is, across the street from me, I had a prostitute who conducted her business out by the hour. And on the other side of my street were the gangs. And so there were police and brawls and detectives in my neighborhood. And if that wasn't bad enough, there were drunks behind us who would fight their roosters and their pit bulls. And so I grew up looking out my bedroom window, like seeing who was going to win in the rooster fight or the pit bull fight. That's what I saw growing up. And so, like I said, many people in my family, not in my family, in my neighborhood, they chose differently. And I chose that just because I grew up rough, I didn't have to answer rough. And my dad had the conversation, my dad and late mom at the time, they had the conversation with me. They said, we're not going to be able to afford your way to college, but you're going to have to figure it out. And you can do it because you're smart and you're capable and you're going to leave your mark on this world, but we can't afford to do it for you. You're going to have to figure it out. And I remember having that conversation when I was in the first grade and going, I have to figure my life out. I'm going to have to make wise choices. And now someone like me, I'm a doctor in my field. I'm a state representative, and it is all about obtaining the American dream, right? Working hard, not waiting for the government to do it for you. And I don't believe, I don't, let me say this. I don't disagree with hand ups. I disagree with handouts, but if someone needs help for a little bit, help them, but they shouldn't stay dependent on government for the rest of their life. And my father was too proud to take any government handouts, and he worked and worked to provide for my family. And that was my same perspective. If I want it, I got to go get it. So I said all of that to say is that is the American dream. And people that are now receiving Social Security, they've worked. They worked hard for that American dream. And I don't think I'm anybody special. I think that I put in the hard work like most New Mexicans. And so the American dream is being able to have a good life that you worked hard for, not that just government handed to you. And so a lot of these people, they were already taxed in their working years. And so essentially, the Social Security tax is a double tax. And so we're looking to remove that. And so Representative Brown was one of my experts on this, and she said many years ago, Social Security wasn't taxed in New Mexico, and it was presented as a larger tax package, and it was slipped in there in the wee hours of the night, and not all of the legislators were aware that it was put in there. And then it started getting taxed. And so slowly, I know that she's really worked hard on this initiative. They've been able to knock off the Social Security tax on the lower income earners, But the goal is to remove it on all incomes because a worker was already taxed in their working years.
Yeah. And New Mexico needs to attract those higher earners as well. We can't just be a haven for poverty. We need to bring people at all income levels who would like to reside in the land of enchantment. And with the amount of money that the state has, it's obvious that we can do a lot of great things. But before we, well, I'm going to move on to talk to you a little bit about being from Hobbs in an area that is conservative, in an area that has the oil and gas money and that industry in it. And I just want you to kind of talk about how the people of Hobbs and people like yourself who represent that area kind of it's got to be frustrating to see the approach taken by the rest of New Mexico and the New Mexico elected officials when it comes to building a free market economy, the oil and gas industry and preserving that. I'm just going to throw it open to you to take it whatever way you want. But Hobbs is much different culturally and economically from the rest of the state.
Well, let me just say this. Oil and gas is not just an industry in New Mexico. Oil and gas is the industry in New Mexico. And you can tell I come from oil country. It is the lifeblood of New Mexico. Oil and gas um, was responsible for 49% of the state's budget last year. Last year, oil and gas provided 13 billion in local and state revenue. And so my area produces the most. And so let me just say this, it is personal. It is personal to me when people attack the industry of New Mexico. There was a very outlandish bill, Paul, I don't know if you followed that one during the session, but they called it children's safe zones. And it came to my energy committee and it came to my health and human services committee. And they were trying to stop oil and gas activity within 1 mile of a school. And they were saying, during our heated debates, I even got one of them to say that we were poisoning our children and they were trying to shut it all down. And in where I live, in Hobbs and in Lee County, there's over 200 wells near schools. And so we got into a heated debate. And at one point, I stopped and I looked at the bill sponsor and I said, why are you doing this to us? And I almost got gavelled down, Paul. And the chair looked at me and she said, Representative Sena Cortez, you will not make this personal. And I looked at both of them and I said, it is personal. It's personal to me and it's personal to the people in my community. This is the industry. This people, and then maybe in the northern part of the state that are so against it, they just see, I'm still working to understand their perspective. It's a very distorted perspective about the oil and gas industry because this industry takes care of families. When I see this industry, I think of my family. I think of my students. I think of my friends. I think of the schools and all of the small businesses that oil and gas supports. I think of the state's budget. I think of how it is funding the things that we want and the things that we need in New Mexico. And without it, we don't have jobs. Without it, we don't have people that can afford a good life for their families. And so I just want to reiterate, it is not an industry, it is the industry. And I will continue to fight like hell to defend it, to advocate for it, because our life depends on it here.
Yeah, it's the industry that benefits New Mexico, and it's obviously what we all depend on for a wide variety of products to get from place to place, and the plastics and everything else. But of course, the financial resources and jobs and other things that it provides as well. Well, we don't have too long yet left, but oh, go ahead.
I said, I take all your time, you said we had like 30 minutes or so, but I thought, in legislative time, that means like 5 or 6 hours.
Well, I can't let you filibuster. I suppose if Wally wanted to leave the mic open and you could just ramble on and on, that would be your choice. But I don't think that would be a great episode of Tipping Point, New Mexico. So I know you're not planning to do that, but I do want to kind of ask you. This was your first, I assume, first time in a kind of elected office. Maybe you'd been elected to something else, but uh, is that an accurate statement that
This
this
is
was
my
your
first time being in public office.
okay? So were there any surprises? You mentioned, the view that the cultural conflict between a lot of folks in northern New Mexico and uh, folks in the southeast of the state, and their differing views on the oil and gas industry. But were there things that you were surprised about when you got to Santa Fe and got to understand the process and the way it works or doesn't work and the people there? Were you able to kind of form you said you worked on it. Were there any specific alliances across partisan lines that you
Actually,
were particularly proud of? Just anything that surprised you or that you were able to do that you were especially proud of in Santa Fe?
so one of the things, I got a bill passed and I was extremely proud of that, being a rookie and having my first legislative session. But
And they sing to you, or don't they do some like embarrassing? You have to sing to them, right?
and being the first female Hispanic in my position, I thought that it was important that I take it back to my roots. And I sang Volver by Vicente Fernandez. And I just want you to know I am tone deaf. And so I can't sing to save my life, but I went for it, even threw in a little bit of vibrato. So let me tell you, with me being tone deaf, it was a real treat for everybody in there.
Well,
But
you do everything else well, so you have to have some chink in the armor in terms of your skill sets. So,
well, thank you. One thing I'm particularly proud of is my All Cities and Counties fund bill that I took through two committees, which is a big deal to have a Republican bill make it to its second committee. But I had bipartisan support. And I don't know if you remember in 2019, HB6 was passed. And what this was, it was a destination tax. So it took oil and gas GRTs and robbed them from the municipalities and gave it to Santa Fe. And again, it was part of a larger tax bill. And I don't know if all the legislators at that time knew the unintended consequences, but the unintended consequence for my community, we lost up to 20 million annually. And that's money for infrastructure, for this, for the fire department, the police department, for businesses. There's so much money that is used for that we have lost. And so I presented it into two committees. I presented it a little late because the tax package was already out, but I do have bipartisan support. And so the Speaker of the House, Representative Javier Martinez, has agreed to co-sponsor that bill with me. We're going to navigate it during interim and then present it the next session. And what this would do, the way that I have proposed the bill, is that it'll help all 33 counties in New Mexico, not just my county, but it gives money back to the municipalities. Now, are we going to be able to give them their full amount? Maybe not. But if we can move the needle just a little bit and start restoring money back to the municipalities where it belongs, I think that it will help our communities immensely. And so that's something I'm particularly proud of, is because I am reaching across party lines, keeping my conservative values, but finding areas that we do agree on to co-sponsor bills together, because being in the minority, that is the only way it will work, is if we work with the other side to get bills passed. And then to answer your other question, Paul, I felt prepared going in. I knew that I was in the minority. I knew what I signed up for. And, being in the legislative session this past January, February, and March, I knew that if I wanted it, I'd have to go out and get it and work for it, just like I did growing up in the hood and fighting and scrapping to even become a doctor in my field. If I wanted it, that's what it was going to take.
yeah, and a lot of people don't understand, and you're probably just getting started on this. the interim committee process. It's another huge investment of time, and it doesn't necessarily involve everybody all the time getting to these committee hearings. But do you have any expectations for that as well as a special session?
Um, Actually, yes. So I have requested to be a voting member on the Energy Committee and then to be an advisory member on the Health and Human Services Committee. And then I will also have to travel to the Tax and Rev Committee because I want to navigate the Social Security tax, the elimination of the Social Security tax, the income tax, and then this all cities and fund bill to restore GRTs back to municipalities. And I really want to navigate that and work on nurturing relationships with the other side and having meaningful conversations that can lead to lasting change for New Mexico. So I'm ready to put in the work. The interim committees start in June. So I'm actually excited and ready to get back to work in those areas. As far as the special session is concerned, my side, the House and also the Senate Republicans, our caucus, the morning after the session was done, as soon as it was done, we called for a special because we do not believe that the juvenile crime has been addressed here in New Mexico. And, among other issues like medical malpractice caps, those need to be addressed. Affordability needs to be addressed, but especially the juvenile violent offenders, we want to hold them accountable. And you've heard about the Las Cruces mass shooting. Those are some things that we're facing in our community with violent offenders that are young. So we need to address that. So the governor actually agreed with us and wants to have a special session. If we have it, it'll happen during the summer. So we're waiting to see, just like the rest of everyone.
All right. Well, thank you very much for your service, Elaine Sena Cortez, representative from Hobbs. Any last points you would like to make before we conclude this episode?
I just want to say thank you so much for your kindness to me, Paul. In the session, I know I was like the squeaky wheel that probably gets the oil. I called and texted you a lot. I'm so grateful that you were my expert and that we were able to develop a friendship. And more than anything, I'm grateful for the trust of District 62 to put me in this position. I want to be a good steward of it, and I want to work hard, and I want to make lasting change for New Mexico. So it is the honor and the joy of my life to be here. So thank you.
Well, I certainly appreciate your optimistic attitude and your friendship as well, and your go-getter aspects. You're just somebody who's, like you said, not going to take no for an answer, and I think we need more of that, especially on the conservative Republican side. And we'll see you hopefully in the interim, possibly in Hobbs or Southeast New Mexico or some interim committee hearing, but we'll work forward on some of these tax related issues as well and hone them and hopefully get a little more traction and hearing for them in the near future. But thanks again, and enjoy that time with your family before the interms begin.
Thank you so much. Have a great day.
All right. Thanks for listening to this week's episode. Find all episodes at tippingpointnm.com or at the Rio Grande Foundation's YouTube channel. Subscribe to the show at Apple, Stitcher, or tell Google Home to play Tipping Point New Mexico. Thanks to Path 3 Marketing for producing this show.